In previous modules, we've explored the background to mind mapping and looked at some of the many uses of mind maps. We've also focused on establishing a robust technique. This will ensure that as you start to use mind maps to increase your effectiveness and efficiency, you will quickly be able to focus on the content of what you're doing rather than on the process of mind mapping. So in this module, I want to talk you through how to use mind maps to help you to think more comprehensively and introduce you to a simple process that you can adapt to any activity which involves or should involve thinking. And the sorts of typical activities we're talking about here would include putting presentations together, writing reports, planning activities and projects of various sorts, writing articles, solving problems, making decisions, perhaps communicating ideas or plans to other people. And many of these activities suffer from the same problem, which can best be explained by reference to a presentation. And the story I often tell on many of our live seminars is at the time when I was working as a management consultant, and I had teams of consultants working for and with me. And very often we'd be asked to put presentations together. And whenever I asked one of my consultants to put a presentation together, invariably they would come back to me after maybe an hour, having got themselves an outline. Their first objective was to get an outline. And almost always the outline looked something like this. It's a single page of paper, a series of bullet points, perhaps some sub-bullet points as well. And they were happy at this stage because having got the outline, they could then go and prepare the slides or write the words or do the research that was necessary. However, any thinking that they then did was bounded by the structure that they'd very quickly hit upon. So the problem was that their thinking was limited by premature structuring. So what's the solution to this? Well, very simply, all we do is we split the process of thinking and exploration from the process of structuring. So in the case of a presentation, we think as widely around the subject as we can to begin with, and the thinking incorporates possible content, the audience, objectives, objections, questions, logistics, and so on. I'll give you a more complete breakdown of the things that we need to think about in a moment or two. And then only when we've done that do we move to the structuring stage. Now, of course, at the structuring stage you may want to return to something more linear. Actually, I'd recommend that you then do a second mind map in which you explore the structure of your actual presentation as opposed to think widely about all the different aspects of it. So the mind map gives us a tool with which to do the thinking and exploration where it can have the greatest impact at the beginning of the process rather than after the structure has been arrived at. So I have an exercise for you. Imagine that you've just been asked by your manager to put together a 15-minute presentation to a group of visitors to your organisation, telling them about you, your department, and the organisation. At this stage, your manager hasn't told you any more than this. So you don't know any more than this about the objectives, what he'd like to see in content, who the visitors are, what they already know, what they don't know, what would be useful for them, and so on. Although you may want to include some of those questions on your mind map. Because what I'd like you to do is to put a mind map together covering all aspects of the presentation. So this is the thinking and exploration stage. You're not structuring your presentation yet. This mind map should help. The intention here is to think as widely around your subject, in this case the presentation for your manager, as you possibly can, as quickly as you can. So it would be useful to include on your mind map what you do know about the audience, in this case very little, but what you need to know so that you can go and ask appropriate questions. In the absence of any further objectives from your manager, you may want to be very clear about what your objectives are, so that your success criteria for the presentation are established right from the beginning. You're going to explore as widely as you can on this mind map, the different subjects and perspectives that you can bring, illustrations of successes from perhaps from your department, different facts, case studies, anecdotes that you think may be useful. You might want to explore on the map how you can provide insight or inspiration or understanding. Think about the different formats that you may want to use. Are you planning on giving any handouts? Where is this going to take place? Who are the speakers? What else will they be covering? Are there any overlaps? Now in this case, this is going to be asking lots of questions you don't necessarily have the answers to. The idea here is to give you a template that you could use whenever you're putting a presentation together. You'll notice that on this map there's nothing about putting the structure of your presentation together. It's all about exploration. Think as widely as possible about both the potential content, potential content, and all the things around it in terms of logistics, objectives, audience, and so on. So just to go back to the exercise, suggest you give yourself a time limit of around 10 minutes. Pause the video when you're ready to start and put together as extensive a mind map as you possibly can. Welcome back. I hope you found that exercise a useful one. It's very important to suspend the structuring of your output, and the mind map allows you a tool to think and explore around the subject as widely as you like. So you should have in front of you now an extensive mind map with lots of ideas for potential content, some of which may be rejected at a later point, some ideas for how to get your story across as effectively as possible. You may have on the map the sorts of questions that you may be anticipating, some questions that you now have for your manager about what he or she wants to see in the presentation. So we've talked earlier in this program about the importance of maintaining a radiant hierarchical structure in your map. That aspect of structuring is very different than structuring the output of what it is you're working towards. In this case, a presentation, but of course it could be a report or a project plan, a solved problem, or anything else. So try to get into the habit of thinking as widely as possible on your mind maps. Any linkages that you notice between different branches, draw branches and arrows to link those together. Use highlighters to highlight particular things that you want to stress in your presentation, things that you need to go and find out more about. Add codes to your map that are useful to you, and make it a personal productivity tool that you can use time and time again.